Hey everyone. All right, well, we are wrapping up this course and we are going to talk about leadership in nursing. So, chapter 15, 16, we're going to talk about excellence, the culture of excellence, and then 17 ends with QI, looking ahead globally in what's going on in healthcare. So, I think chapter 15 is probably one of my most favorite topics to discuss because nursing leadership, nurses are natural leaders. We're taught from the beginning of school how to become leaders within our role. And it doesn't we all know that doesn't necessarily mean what position you are in your organization, right? So, you can be a leader from the bedside, you could be a leader from the triage phone, but leadership it's not a position, it's something that you earn and that you model, and people want to model you. So, what are challenges of strategic leadership and innovation? What is the nature of organizational change? How can planned organizational change be managed? And what is organization development? And how can stress be managed in a change environment? So what are challenges of strategic leadership and innovation? So strategic leadership creates the capacity for ongoing strategic change. So, and the idea of strategic leadership is there is a plan behind the leadership, correct? It's one thing to develop yourself as a leader, which is very important, somebody that people want to model, that they take cues from, that they trust, and that holds authority with different areas of an organization. Well, strategic leadership takes that to the next step because there's an end goal. And so it creates a capacity for ongoing strategic change. And, part of you can say, wow, that sounds almost devious. Like there's something, an end goal. And hopefully everyone's end goal is to promote evidence-based practice, standard of care, and a high functioning organization that is in the best interest of patients, because that is in the end what nurses do. So the leadership creates a capacity so that there's ongoing strategic change. So a nurse who portrays strategic leadership is somebody who is leading the way, guiding the way for change to happen within organizations strategically so that it's done positively. So components of strategic leadership: determining the organization's purpose or vision. And if you work for an organization with a purpose or vision that's not in line with yours, and it's not a vision that you care at all to try and get behind, that's definitely something you have to consider. It might not be a place for you as a leader. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't try and be a leader. You can try and project change and try and change the purpose and the vision of the organization, but you have to know that ahead of time. Exploiting and maintaining the organization's core competencies. And so again, you hear this word exploiting and you think, wow, that sounds bad. But exploiting meaning is getting to the basis of core competency of an organization's desire, what they wrote down when they formed an organization, of what this organization means, and using it to make that change that you want. So, if a core competency is to promote wellness despite financial status of a patient, and so then you say, okay, I want to start a clinic or I want to start a group and apply for a grant that's going to help me teach young people about sex education and what it means to be sexual in today's world, whether it's about contraception, pregnancy prevention, STD prevention, and they're saying no to you, and you say, but this is our core competency. So, I'm doing this to make positive change for the organization and in the name of the organization, and getting that support. So that, if you stand for something good, you can't be stopped. And then developing the organization's human capital. And what does that mean? So capital is kind of a financial term, meaning money that you bring to the table, or worth that you bring to the table, right? So human worth. And you think, okay, well, all humans are worth something. Well, obviously, but meaning in terms of employment, in terms of people on the team, you're developing the organization's team to be worth a lot, to be deep. You know, that term that they use in sports. We have a deep team. That means we have 3 quarterbacks who are awesome. We have, there's not just one good nurse and then everyone else is kind of okay, or maybe not even that functional, but everybody is going to be great. So if the CEO gets sick, then their backup is there. If the nurse manager is sick, then there's a backup. And not just that, that there is someone always able to function at the highest level of their license. So that's what the idea of developing organizations human capital, because you can't work outwardly unless you work inwardly. And then sustaining an effective organizational culture. And this is really hard. I'm working on this right now at my current organization. And it's, you have these missions and you have this purpose, but if you don't have the right culture within your organization, it doesn't matter. That purpose and that vision is not going to be upheld. So changing the organization's culture from the bottom up, from the top down, to say we want to be a high functioning team where everybody has a voice and everybody works really hard for the same goals, because when everybody shares the same vision, everyone's going to work that hard to reach that goal. And then emphasizing and displaying ethical practices. And this is, of course, important because, we talked about before how some of these terms, strategic leadership and exploiting and maintaining organization's core, it kind of sounds devious. And those words became devious. They're not innately devious, but they became like that because usually it was somebody with an ulterior motive doing those things. And so making sure that, you're not saying the ends justify the means. Our means have to be just as ethical and justifiable as we get there. So as we build our organization's culture, making sure you're still using ethical hiring practices, ethical disciplinary practices, the way you treat patients, or saying, we want to be the first hospital that has low readmission rate, and then refusing to admit people that have a high rate of readmission. Well, that's not ethical, right? So you're achieving your goal in a way that's actually contra what your organization's core value is. And then establishing balanced organization control. So that's obviously important too. And most places have done a good job with that. So the idea that there are many different levels in higher parts of the organization so that the power is balanced. And a great example of this that happened many, many years ago, decades before I became a nurse, well, maybe decades before I became a nurse, maybe a decade, is that there are chief nursing officers and nursing directors and nursing managers. And so that, disciplines the same discipline. Does that sound funny? Yes. So doctors don't fire nurses, nurses don't fire doctors, nurses don't fire MAs or CRRs, because you need that balanced organizational control. And it's a protection for the staff and a protection for the patients and a protection for each discipline, right? So that's also very important in your organization. If you see a gap in that, trying to find a way to change it. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go up to your CEO and be like, your balance of power is wrong, and you need to fix it, because obviously you're not going to be hanging around the organization much longer. So sustainable competitive advantage relies on creativity and innovation. This creativity, innovation, very important, because in any healthcare setting, no matter what decade you're in, you will always be short of resources. It's just the very fact of healthcare. Because for one, there's always a shortage of healthcare clinicians, right? There's a nursing shortage, there's a physician shortage, there's an advanced practice shortage, PA shortage, MA shortage, CNA shortage, there's high turnover. And then healthcare costs money, and the gap keeps getting bigger and bigger. And so, it's so easy to sit back and say, well, I will do that when we have all the resources. They'll never happen. And I will admit that when I first started as a nurse practitioner, I said, I'm not going to be able to see X amount of patients a day until I get more staffing. And honestly, all that did was it affects my skill, because it means I'm not seeing as many patients to hone my skills, and I'm hurting patients. And so creativity and innovation is really important. Looking at workflows, looking at roles, and redesigning those roles so that you can work at the fullest and make your organization run the way it needs to. Now, not saying that you should do things in an unsafe way, but you know, I've never worked in a place that purposefully like made you hang by the edge of your teeth the least amount of staff just to make an extra buck. I know some people say they have, and they probably have worked at places like that. And there's definitely some work to where you need to implement change there. But for the most part, a lot of places want to staff safely because it's in everyone's best interest. Because sentinel events are actually they can be quite debilitating for an organization. Okay, so creativity is the generation of a novel idea or unique approach to solving problems or crafting opportunities. So I'm going to share with you my creativity, okay, with something we do where I work. And this is what my DMP project is. So I'm a primary care provider. There's doctors and nurse practitioners. We don't utilize PAs just because of the way our charter is written, but a lot of other places utilize PAs. So I'll also include PAs here because PAs are wonderful. Every year for a diabetic, you have to do a foot exam. They take 2 minutes. Well, in reality, when you're seeing a diabetic patient, those 2 minutes, you don't have time to do them. But technically, these diabetic foot exams can be done by a registered nurse. It is well within the scope of their practice. And so having the nurse come in and do it before the provider gets into the room, not only is going to have the nurse work at the top of their license, which is empowering. I know for me that when I was an RN and someone said to me, "Can you go unclog that toilet?" I remember thinking, wow, I'm so glad I went to 4 years of school to go unclog a toilet versus, hey, can you help us come up with a way to decrease line infections on the unit? That made me feel like, yeah, you think I'm smart, you think I'm valuable, and you know that I have the skills to help you with this, right? Now, did I go and clog a toilet? Absolutely, because I wanted my patient to have a clean bathroom. But was that my only job? No. And was that always the responsibility given to me? No, because, you know, where I worked utilized nurses for the most part properly, and we were, you know, doing cool things like, you know, in quality improvement projects. So here's the deal. We're going to start implementing it. But a lot of other places started doing this, and they had a huge increase in patients getting diabetic foot exams. And those are important exams because you want your patient's risk for foot ulcers to be identified. So it's that same idea, you know, CNAs can actually do quite a bit. So Cincinnati Children's Hospital realized within a CNA, a PCA scope of practice, especially the PCAs who are in nursing school, could change a central line dressing. Central line dressing changes take time, they have to be done often, and they have to be done correctly. And so utilizing a PCA versus the RN, who is so task heavy, was this great innovation, and they found that they were getting more central line dressing changes done on time, and the infection rate was low. So it's looking creatively at all your resources that you have and everything that has to get done. And innovation is the process of creating new ideas and putting them into practice, and they go hand in hand.